Huh?
What are you doing?
It's the text of
I'm on Instagram. I'm turning the music down. Yeah.
You're already on Facebook.
I gotta check my socials. See how many new followers I have. Whatever. Well, hello again, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. For those that came in a little later, glad you're here. Thank you for coming and joining us here on the Smoky Ridge. The Smoky Mountain. We're going to move on in our study of 1 Peter today. We're going to be starting in chapter 5. And I thought we were going to finish this today, but no such luck. I get into it, I'm like, yeah, we're going to take on a whole chapter today, and then, man, sometimes at the last minute, like, stuff just starts, wow, look at all the cool stuff going on in there, we need to talk about this. So if you have your Bible and you want to follow along, open it to 1 Peter, chapter 5. To recap, last week we finished chapter 4, because that's how we do things. Or maybe one of these days I'll teach backwards through a book, right? Yeah. That'd be weird. Last week we saw... Peter told us there's no improvement without testing. That the things we go through serve a good purpose. He talked about the fiery ordeal that the readers of his letter were going through, and they were going through fiery ordeals. And we talked about how the Greek for that means that there is a fire with a purpose, not just a pointless fire, but a fire with a purpose. And the fire applied right can test things. Right? We talked about the assayers at the mine and how they take a rock and, they melt that thing down, they analyze it, they look at it, they see what's in it. There's something in it they want. There's a lot of stuff they want to get rid of. And they see how to separate the two out. Fire can forge. Fire can make things stronger, like metal. Fire can purify. The same campfire that warms you, I don't know if you guys do this, we have these little metal marshmallow forks when we go camping. And after you've toasted marshmallows on them, you get that sticky goop. And nobody wants to touch that. Nobody wants to take it home and clean it. So how do you clean it? The same fire that warms you, just ignite that stuff, burn that stuff off. That's what fire kind of does with us. It takes the sticky goop of our souls and kind of burns that stuff away. And then Peter pointed out that there's no glory without guts. We talked about the Olympics, how everybody wants to be on the Olympic podium. Right? Everybody wants to be gold medal. Everybody wants to be receiving the award and the honor. Everybody wants the glory, but the glory doesn't come. You don't get on the Olympic podium just by deciding you want to be there. Deciding to be an Olympic athlete is easy. Being an Olympic athlete is a whole different thing. When you see them on the podium, you don't see the years and years of blood, sweat, and tears and training and early mornings and late nights and I don't feel like it, but I'm gonna anyway. There's no guts. Or no glory without guts. It's hard to be saved, is what Peter said last week. It's not hard to get saved, it's hard to be saved. Getting saved, choosing to do something, that's cool. Choosing to do a through hike, choosing to, run a marathon, that's the easy part. Now the hard part comes, the actual doing, the training, the doing. So there's no glory without the guts. And there was a lot of hard stuff in there. And then in verse 19, we got one of those so then of chapter 4. So one of those so then statements, which means, I know I've thrown down a lot of hard stuff. I'm going to make this easier. I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to, make an empirical formula out of this. I'm going to give you the basics here. So then, those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to their faithful Creator. So just give yourself to God when you're suffering and continue to do good. Those are easy things. Right, all this hard stuff, and he's like, so then, just give yourself to God when you're suffering, and continue to do good. All right, that's manageable. That's manageable. So we go on in chapter 5 today. To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder and a witness of Christ's sufferings, who will also share in the glory to be revealed. So to the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder. And those were the people that were overseeing other people in hard times. Remember, this was tough. These people were scattered. They were persecuted. They were run out of town, basically. They were living in foreign places where they may or may not even know the language. They talk different. They look different. People know they're different. They've got this different faith, and they're, it was really hard for these people. So then there's these elders that come along that are supporting these people through that. Peter does not appeal to them as the CEO. He doesn't come along like, I'm the CEO of Christian Stuff LLC, and I appeal to you based on my position. He doesn't do that. He doesn't appeal to them as a general. He doesn't appeal to them as a captain, as a king, as a Caesar. He doesn't appeal to them as any of that. He appeals as a fellow elder. He probably could have thrown that down. He was one, he didn't seek to rise above and be seen above everybody else. He didn't want to do that. I'm sure he would have been content with that in his younger days. Throwing down the, do you know who I am card. And for those of you that followed this, you saw, if you were with us as we studied the Gospel of John, that Peter, where he is now is not where he once was. He was a wild card. He was a ruffian. He was, I'm sure there was a time when he would have been like, do you know who I am? Right? I walked on water. Did you see that? It was only lasted a minute, but I did. I walked on water. Did you walk on water? But they got back to the boat, right? Remember that. But I'm sure there was a time in his life he would have thrown that down. Do you know who I am? I'm the Apostle Peter. Saint Peter. They're going to call me Saint. They're going to make a basilica named after me someday. Do you know who I am? And he wasn't doing that. He appeals to them as one of them, as a fellow elder. So what is an elder? Begs the question. What is an elder? We have elders and deacons in the church, and a lot of people don't even know what that means. An elder, when someone is elder, it just means they're older. It means old dudes. Right? I'm getting to be elder. I feel it in the morning sometimes. I can't stay up late like I used to. I used to be able to do 4 hours of sleep and just pop out and let's do this. And I'm elder. Old dudes. That's one aspect of it. And one aspect of what he's talking about was the old dudes that have been around for a while. But also people with experience. Old dudes with old souls, right? People that have been around. People that have seen some stuff go down in life and lived through it. To talk about it, to help other people with it. The other side of it is those who teach, those who lead, those who guide God's people in the church. That's what it is. And when you talk about biblical eldership, the full descriptions, if you want to look, are in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7, and Titus 1, 6 through 9. I'm not going to go into that's like a whole other message by itself. But basically, the elders are people who have the qualities of things like, and he tells us, being faithful to your spouse. It's a good thing, right? Being sober, not being violent, right? Being a non-violent person. Being respectable, being able to teach, not being addicted. And it talks about with wine, but I think that applies about anything. It's like, I'm not addicted to wine, I'm addicted to beer. I'm good. No, it's like, don't be addicted to stuff. Because that stuff then will always come between you and God. You will always elevate that and worship that on the altar of your heart ahead of God if you're addicted to something. Just be. Yeah. Being patient and self-controlled. Not being a lover of money. These are the things he talks about, etc., etc. And as you look at these attributes and you look down the whole list, you see that these are attributes that model Jesus well. That as you do these things, and this is your heart and this is who you are, that is, these are all things that could be used to describe Jesus. And so we should seek to be like that. So that's what an elder is. And then there are deacons. Right? Elders and deacons. And I remember I served in a church where they had just gotten rid of the elder and deacon thrones. There was like the platform, and there was the pulpit, and there were like these throne-looking, medieval-looking wooden chairs where the elders and deacons would sit. And I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Sit up there. I am Elder so-and-so. Yes. Be impressed, So elders and deacons. And the deacons is from the Greek word diakonos, which just means a waiter, literally. One who waits tables, one who serves, an errand runner, one who just serves people. These are the hands-on servants of the people. And as you're an elder and you're a deacon, if you're like aspiring to that, or God's calling you to that kind of thing. I was at a pastor's conference one time, and Xavier Reese, who's Raul Reese's brother, and it was one of those things where the main speakers, who was in Tahoe, and the main speakers got snowed out. They couldn't land the plane. And so the worship leaders got up, and it was amazing. These guys just got up and gave us insight. And Xavier Reese was there, and he got up, and he's talking about this being a waiter, being a servant, and how it's like waiting tables for the people of God. You're just bringing them stuff that they need, You're bringing them the stuff to build them up. And he's like, and he had this accent, when you bring it out, don't mess with the food. He said, don't mess with the food. Would there be anything more disconcerting than somebody bringing out like your burger and fries at the Diamondback or something? They set it down. It's like, oh, you're a little chubby. I don't think you need all those fries. So let's take some of those away. Or, oh man, I don't like the way that burger's situated. We'll just, it's like, what are you doing? Don't mess with the food, man. Just serve. Don't mess with the food. Don't mess with what God is doing. Now, in church leadership, and since we're on it, I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Every denomination has its own take on how to handle the selecting and the installing of people as elders and deacons, and it's very formal sometimes. I was looking through, like Baptists and Presbyterians and even Mormons, and all these faith systems, and the way they do it is all different, and some of it is extremely formal. And in Calvary Chapel, and especially here, I like the way that we do it. It's like, if you're doing it, then you're it, right? If you're doing the job, then you're it. If you're acting like an elder, you're, welcome to the eldership. If you're a deacon and God's called you to that, welcome. If you're doing the job, you're probably it. If you need the title before you do the work, you might want to find something else to do. I think I told the story before. We got some people here that haven't been here in a while, about my youth leaders. I used to do youth ministry, and we went on a camp out, a whole weekend event. I'm like, I need some help. Just covering the bases, just ministering to people, praying with people. So I took my best and my brightest in the youth group, like my seniors and juniors, and like, oh, you guys, I'm gonna make you leaders. I want you to help out. And rather than praying for people and hearing people out, when they had something to say after they were really impacted by what was going on, they turned into tyrants. They turned into control freaks. They wanted to beat everybody. They wanted to rule like tyrants, and it wasn't good. So, if you need the title, sometimes all you got to give people is a title, and they'll change in ways that aren't good. So Peter got started in ministry. Let's go back and let's look at how Peter got started in ministry as an elder of elders. As one of them. He got started in ministry on a beach at the end of the Gospel of John. Everything had been leading him to this. Those of you who have been with us might remember that Peter he had denied Jesus 3 times. He said, I would never. Sometimes when you say never say never. Because God's like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to test you. I'm going to show you something you didn't know about yourself, but I knew about you. And he denied Jesus 3 times, disappeared for a while, thought he was done, right? Just kind of vanished in the story for a while. And then they're on the beach. And, Jesus is there. He's made them breakfast. He sits down. He's serving them. He makes them food, brings them in, and Jesus sits down with them. And Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? He's asked him first, do you agape me? Which means, do you, just whether I love you back or not, no matter what happens, do you love me? And Peter had already demonstrated that he probably didn't have that in him, right? Because he denied him, walked away, disappeared. And Peter says, I love you like a brother, right? I phileo you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Jesus asked him again, do you agape me? And Peter's like, I love you like a brother. And he's like, take care of my sheep. And then Jesus says, Peter, do you love me like a brother? Do you phileo me? And he says, I do. I love you like a brother. I phileo you. Just like that secondary love. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. He says, you'll get there. You'll get to the agape. But you don't have to be there to start. This is where Peter was called into ministry. Or he was brought back. He was reconciled. He was restored. And he was sent out there on that beach. And Peter just did what Jesus asked him to do. Very simple. And Peter says, I appeal to you not only as a fellow elder, but also as a witness of Christ's sufferings and a participant in the glory and the good stuff that is yet to be revealed. Think of the things that Peter saw in his life. Think of the things that Peter was witness to as he walked with Jesus. That must have been something. And then to still deny him and walk away. We've all got that in us. Everything we think we would not do, that's in there. You're capable of things you don't even think you are. And we just got to be vigilant about those things. Yes, Peter was witness to the sufferings, for sure. But he was also witness to the transfiguration. That's a cool story. So much that I want to read a little bit of that from Mark 9, 2-7. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John. These were the troublemakers. It's like, I want to keep you guys where I can see you. So he took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up to a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them, which means they saw a glimpse of what he rightfully is in his full glory, the full-on Jesus glory. And his clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses. Whoa! These guys have been dead a long time, and here Elijah, Moses, Jesus transfigured. Whoa! And they were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. And, sometimes I'll say that and, kind of throw Peter under the bus. When he didn't know what to say, it didn't stop him. It's good for us to be here. That's the one for the duh files right there. Of course it's good for us to be here. Rabbi, it's good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud. This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him. The voice comes and goes, don't build shelters. That's not why we're here. This is my son. Listen to him. Right? Don't go build shelters. Listen to what he has to say. Peter saw that. He was witness to that. Peter saw Jesus walk on water. Peter walked on water for a minute. Peter saw Jesus heal people. Peter saw Jesus, and again going back to John, Peter saw Jesus wrap himself up in a towel and get down on the floor and wash the grubby, nasty feet of disciples because no one else would. He saw that. Jesus washed Peter's feet. And can you imagine, as you're all sitting around, well, it's the job of the lowest person to wash the feet of everybody. And I'm not doing it. All looking at each other. These feet ain't going to wash themselves. Who's in, And then to sit there and be looking down at the top of the head of Jesus as he's washing your feet. Ouch. And Peter was witness to that. Think of the things that Peter saw. And Jesus also warned Peter in John 21 that it was going to be a tough journey, that this was not going to be an easy thing, and that Peter would meet an end that was not ideal. Everybody just kind of wants to go to sleep and go out that way, and he's like, Peter, it's not how it's going to be for you, man. It's going to be hard. So Peter wasn't surprised by the hardships that he and the others were experiencing during this time. They were facing persecution. They were facing persecution of an empire. They were facing persecution of their own religious system that they came out of. And it was all closing in. And, the pressure was on. People receiving this letter needed leaders to walk them through this stuff, to be at their side, to walk them through these hard times. Sometimes when you sign on for leadership, if you've ever been offered that, sometimes we enter into leadership or ministry of some kind, we got stars in our eyes. It's like, oh, it's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. God's doing something. We've got to get involved. We're going to be involved because we're going to experience the favor and the blessing of God. Yeah, things are going on. The future is so bright, we got to wear shades in ministry, That's how I felt when I first got involved in ministry. I was in my early 20s when I first became an elder in this church. It might have been, in retrospect, might have been a little premature to install this guy But man, there was good stuff going on. You know, God honored that, and we were a ragtag little fellowship. There were bikers, there were rockers. We met at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because nobody could make it to church at 9 or 10. And you know, there were like homeless people that would come. There were people who were like being freed from drug addiction. There were things going on. People were getting saved. People were getting baptized. And my senior pastor, little redheaded biker guy about yay big, looked like Yosemite Sam. Pastor Fred, he's like, I'd like you to be on the worship team. And then did that for a while. He's like, how do you feel about teaching once in a while, you know, being an elder? I'm like, oh, I guess so. Things are going on. It's good. You know, we're experiencing the favor of God. This is going to be awesome. Yeah, I got the stars in my eyes. Let's do this. Where do I sign? How do I sign up? I'm doing it. All right. And then, you know, a couple of my first things I had to deal with when I actually became the associate pastor of that church was, you know, he lived out of town. He was doing a church in Marysville in the morning and then coming to Sacramento. And we did the church in the afternoon in Sacramento. And he lived up in Marysville, so sometimes he'd call on me. He's like, I need you to go see a lady in the hospital. I'm like, oh, right on, I'll go do that. I go, it's a lady who's much younger than I am now who's dying of AIDS. I'm like, I don't know about this. I was here for the favor of God and the blessing and the baptisms and people getting saved. But here's somebody in their darkest time. She's like, why me? You know, it was IV drug use, like way in the past that she'd escaped and gotten out of that, gotten free of the addictions, and now she's dying of AIDS in the hospital. I'm like, oh man. And then not long after that, I had to sit down with the father of a 14-year-old boy who was dying of cancer. I'm like, this isn't the cool stuff I really wanted. But this is where it's important. People going through their darkest days just need someone to sit with them, to listen to them, to pray with them. And the guy, I didn't even know that I had any kids yet when I was sitting there with this guy who was losing his 14-year-old, and I had nothing. I just sat there and listened to him, let him cry, prayed with him. You know, they need people like that. That's part of what being in church leadership is. It's not all the good stuff, the baptisms, praying people to get saved and adding to the numbers daily. You know, sometimes it looks like this, and this is like the really important stuff in leadership, is walking with people through their darkest days. So Peter appeals to them as a fellow elder. Then he goes on to verse 2. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be. Not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve. Not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. So, what is he appealing to the elders to do? It's like, I appeal to you guys. As one elder to another, I appeal to you as fellow elders and eyewitnesses of the life and the times of Jesus to be shepherds of God's flock that are under your care. As Jesus, this is interesting. I was looking at this, and this is one of those things that came up, like, you know, last minute as I'm like stepping back and looking at all this stuff over. As Jesus appealed to Peter on the beach, Peter is now appealing to other people. He's not throwing down the St. Peter card, the Basilica card, the Apostle card, appealing to them as an elder to do these things because they want to, because they're willing, because they're called. He's not coercing them, not forcing them. So as Jesus appealed to him, he appeals to his fellow leaders to be shepherds. Feed the sheep, tend the sheep, care for the sheep, watch over them. And that's the Greek word episkopeo, which means to oversee and care for something. Have you guys ever been to the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose? That place is awesome. They got mummies in there. And I went there in high school. I thought that was the coolest thing. How cool would it be to be in a museum and be a curator of things, right? A collections curator, where you're into stuff that you're just like really fascinated with, and you're taking care of it, and you're preserving it for future generations. You wouldn't want a guy like me working with the mummies, because I don't know what I'm doing. All right? Wrong guy for the job. It would be really cool, standing there getting up really close, looking at him. That's a like 3,000-year-old dead person right there in front of me, you know, especially in high school. And there are people that go into these museums and they curate the collections, they curate the exhibits, they care for them, and they know what they're doing, they know what they're working with, They know what to look for. If things are going sideways, they know how to fix that, how to preserve these things so that other people can come and see them. And that's kind of what the shepherd's called to do, to be a curator, a collection curator of the people of God. And to do that, you have to be able to look at people, you have to know them, you have to know what they're up against, you have to know what they need, and to preserve them, to uplift them. And that's what Peter appeals as one elder to another for. And he says, not because you must, but because you were willing, because that's the way God wants it. Again, let's go back to the beach. Jesus and Peter sitting there talking on the beach. Look at how Jesus approached Peter. He didn't say, you blew it. I'll let you back in this time. I want you to take care of my sheep. And if you don't, I'm coming back. Right? I told you I'm coming back. I will find you. And I'll put the smackdown on you. Jesus did not do that. There's no coercion, no threats. And Peter's kind of approaching it the same way. So you shouldn't have to be in ministry because you have to. You shouldn't feel like you're being, threatened and compelled and prodded on. It should be a willing thing. And as Jesus was there on the beach with Peter, there was just grace for the past. There was grace for the present. There was grace for the future. And I find that in ministry, those who received much grace, those who have been in the worst places and received a lot of grace, most easily give grace away. Most easily have grace for other people. And that was Peter. He had blown it. It was no secret. He was disqualified. And Jesus is now, because you were disqualified under your own strength, now you're qualified to come in and do this. I'll give you what you need along the way. And this is kind of in line. A couple weeks ago we looked at when Peter said that if you serve, do it with the power of the Holy Spirit. Don't serve under your own power, because you'll just end up like a deflated air mattress, was the example we used. It kind of lines up with that. Don't do it because you have to, but because you're willing, because that's where the good stuff comes from. Not pursuing dishonest gain, he says, but willing to serve. If gain is your motive for getting into ministry, find something else to do. There's plenty of corporations and plenty of places where you can get ahead and you can get gain by being involved and working hard and all that. Ministry's different. You take what the world does and turn it upside down, and that's the Jesus way of doing things. So if gain is your motive to get into ministry for anything, whether it's a steady paycheck, prestige, I'm going to be a mega pastor. I'm going to be on TV. And I'm going to wear, $5,000 shoes. Preachers and Sneakers, man, it's great. Instagram, Preachers and Sneakers, check it out. And I'm going to be impressive, And this is, if you go in with that attitude, just find something else to do. That's not what it's about. If you're going to become an elder, don't come in with the attitude of, hey, I'm going to be around all these other people that I'm going to be over, and they're going to respect me. I could sell insurance to all these people. That's not what it's all about. I joke a lot since we started having money mysteriously appear and get tucked in places on our table before we put the boot out. I joked when that money started coming in. I was like, all right, I'm going to start saving for a Porsche Cayenne. I think that would be the perfect church vehicle. It'll carry the sound system. I am going to look cool. Drive. We'll even put this Sierra Adventure Church logo on the side, And I joke with that, but it's funny that other stuff keeps getting in the way. We're still saving for the Cayenne, and we're not really very far along with that program. Because other stuff keeps getting in the way. Needs, places we can give money to, buying things to do this. We're out here, we don't have electricity, so we had to, get a battery-operated system, and that's the stuff we put it into. The Cayenne's still a very long way off. Although I would settle for the outback wilderness. But even that would be, but I got my old raggedy Outback. It's the right tool for the job. It runs, and we're going to keep using that until we can, save up for the Cayenne. That's not why we're here. We're not seeking to have an extravagant lifestyle to even make a whole living out of this. It's not why we're here. And if that's your motive going into ministry, if you're thinking about it, just do something else. At least for now. God's working with you. He's not done with you. But do something else for now while he's doing that. Not lording over those entrusted to you, Peter says, but being an example. And I told you guys about the student leaders and the tyrant situation that created. The Greek word for lording over, let me see if I can get this right, katakuriuo. That's not going to be on the quiz. Katakuriuo. It means to subdue. I just like saying that. I thought it was a really cool word. To subdue and bring something under your power. That should not be the way you do things in ministry as a church leader. This is the world strategy, right? You subdue, you conquer, you go get it. You get it under everything in your control. Get it under your power. This is the world strategy, not how the kingdom of God operates. We aren't called as church leaders to bring people to submission, right? To go up and shake their hand and play uncle with them. You need Jesus. That's not what we're called to do. Did Jesus ever do that? No, I never saw him do that. I've studied, we studied the Gospel of John very closely and carefully over 2 years plus. Never saw Jesus do that. Like force somebody into submission, grab them around the neck and start choking them out. Are you in? Are you in? Huh? Never saw him do it. The only thing, as you look at the Bible, you look at the things that Jesus says and the things the Bible say, the only thing that we're called to subdue and bring bring into submission is our own sinful nature. So, when going back to the beach, we're going back to the beach again. Jesus and Peter sitting there. Jesus did not say, "Do you love me? You agape me?" And Peter says, "I love you like a brother." I can get that far. And Jesus didn't say, "Beat my sheep." He says, "Feed my sheep. Care for my sheep." And then, if and when you find yourself in church leadership, remember that the sheep are not yours. They are not yours. They are entrusted to your care. Don't let it go to your head. Don't get on a power trip, but lead by example. They're not yours. And a lot of times people are like, "Oh yeah, Pastor so-and-so's church." No, it's not Pastor so-and-so's church. He's the one that's entrusted with the church, but it's not his church, it's God's church. These are God's people. So, don't take ownership of things you shouldn't take ownership for. Don't take ownership of things that aren't yours if you're going into leadership. And then Peter says, when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive a glorious crown that will never fade away. And going way back to the beginning of 1 Peter, he's talking about our inheritance that is forever, that does not perish, it does not fade, it does not rust, it does not wither, it does not wilt. It's forever, but it's out in eternity, and we got to wait for that inheritance until we get there. This kind of lines up with that the crown that you receive as a leader, you shouldn't be doing it for what you receive here. That somewhere out there, one day there will be that crown, that reward. And in the Olympics, the sports competitions back, the Greeks, they would put like a little wreath on your head, and that thing would fade, it would wither, it was temporary. And he's kind of pointing to that, going, the crown you get one day will not fade away, it will not wither. It is not perishable. When the chief shepherd appears. When the chief shepherd appears, you'll get that crown that doesn't wither. When the chief shepherd appears, not when the church paycheck clears. See what I did there? Huh? I'm on my way to being a mega church pastor. That was witty. So yeah, not when, the paycheck clears, not when the whole town knows who you are. It's like, "Oh, hey, that's Pastor so-and-so. I know his church." No, that's not where it happens. The big payoff for leadership isn't, or at least shouldn't be, in this world. And when you're, as a church leader, there are things that happen. Like, we were talking this morning about how the times that we feel least willing to come out here, when we're just tired, and maybe we're squabbling at home. It happens every so often. We're not perfect. I want to let you know that. Those days when it's like, I don't even want to go. And there are those days. And when we actually come anyway, oh man, those are the best days. Good things happen. we're here, we're seeing, we're interacting with people, we're seeing people interact with each other that are moving on in their relationships with God, and we get to be part of that. And what a beautiful thing. Those rewards do come, but you shouldn't be doing it for what you receive here. If you're doing church leadership right, the people out in the world will think you're a failure. It's like, oh, poor Pastor so-and-so. He worked so hard. He died poor. He never even got his Porsche Cayenne. So the shepherd doesn't own the sheep and doesn't work for the sheep. He works for the chief shepherd, and we need to remember that. In God's economy, the authority is based on service, not power. So we're going to leave it there today. Next week, and we talked about the elders, we talked about the old dudes, and we're going to look at the young whippersnappers next week. So come and join us for that. So to recap what we've seen today, the Jesus style of leadership is different than the world style of leadership. It is counterintuitive. The Jesus kind of leadership should look like knowing the flock isn't yours. Not messing with the food. Don't mess with the food. Don't mess with the people, knowing that they're not yours. You're just there to care for them, to take care of them, to teach them. There should be an eagerness to serve, not an obligation. Not where I have to go serve the people today. And that happens sometimes. As I was just talking about, Or how about this? How about pastors who get themselves in a job where that's, and they do it for like a bunch of years, and that's all they're really qualified to do. And they get tired. And they get burned out. And sometimes they don't even know if they believe what they're teaching anymore, but they can't walk away because they can't afford to. Now, it's a different kind of compulsion, isn't it? Can't leave. Can't afford to leave. Got to stay in and fake my way through it. Not healthy for anybody. So an eagerness to serve, not an obligation or a compulsion. There should be a joyful giving attitude, not a joyful getting attitude. Should lead by example and not force. Now, if you've been sitting there, in case you're sitting there going, well, I'm not a leader, so I'm just, you've been sitting there going, what's for lunch? Thinking about what's coming up, If you think you're not a leader and this doesn't apply to you, I would let you know that everyone is somebody's leader. Right? You might not be an elder, you may not have the title. It's better if you don't have the title. You may be, may not have that elder deacon thing going on, but everybody is somebody's leader. Just like everybody is somebody's geek. Everybody is somebody's nerd. You could be the coolest person in the world, and you're going to be somebody's nerd. Somebody's going to think you're a geek, right? And you're going to be somebody's leader. Everybody is somebody's leader. You're walking along the path. You're going to turn around, somebody's going to be walking that path behind you. No matter what that looks like. If you have children, if you have grandchildren, if you're at work with people who are hostile to your faith and they're watching you, wondering if there's anything of value in what you believe and what you do. They're watching. You're leading. Everybody is somebody's leader. And in the same way, everybody is under somebody's leadership. So be wise and be careful whose leadership you place yourself under, present company included. All right? Be careful. The way churches are set up, and like our Western evangelical churches, they're set up to like draw and foster narcissism in the leadership, and it happens. The church, listen to podcasts, and I won't name the church, but there was a pastor who would get mad if not everybody in the room rose to their feet when he walked in. That was like the culture. He walks in, everybody stands up to honor the pastor. That's bunk. That's narcissism. So, these things don't happen. I'm sure he didn't go into this going, yeah, I'm going to have all these people. I'm going to, be controlling them. And they're going to, this is going to be so awesome when they stand up when I walk in the room and give me the respect I deserve. I'm sure it didn't start that way, but it gets there. And God help us when that happens. So just be careful whose authority, whose leadership you place yourself under. And be a leader for somebody. Be thinking about that as you go. Everybody's somebody's leader. And be thinking about that. Look back at the path behind you. See who's walking up. See who's walking that path behind you. And consider how you can lead them. How you can be that leader for them. For anybody in your life. that, you know, is watching you and watching what you do. How can you lead them? And I would encourage you to look at these attributes, these Jesus attributes, as you do it. So, Lord, we thank you for the day you've given us. We thank you for your word. Thank you for what you've shown us today. And it's good to kind of step back and take a look at what leadership is and what it isn't, and to look at how Peter, quote unquote, rose to leadership. And Lord, I pray that all of us would have that humility in mind as we, you know, look at who we're walking in front of in our trek on this earth, and help us to be willing, not coerce. Help us to be humble. Help us to not be seeking power and reward in the here and now. Help us just to be serving people. Help us to let those words echo in our heads. Feed my sheep. Tend my sheep. Let that be what drives us, Lord, in whatever way you have for us to lead. Let that echo in my heart.